Magic Treehouse, Book Number 25, Stage Fright on the Summer Night by Mary Pope Osborne. Chapter 1, Special Magic. Jack and Annie sat on their porch. Lightning bugs blinked in the warm summer twilight. Wow, a shooting star, said Annie, pointing at the sky. Jack looked up, just in time to see the streak of light flash through the sky. The light hovered above the Rock Creek woods. Then it disappeared into the tree trunk. Jack caught his breath. He turned to Annie. That was no shooting star, he said. Right, she said. They jumped up. Jack grabbed his backpack from inside the front hall. Dad, Mom, can we go out? He called. We'll be back soon. 10 minutes, no more, their mom said. Okay, said Jack. He closed the door. Let's go, hurry. He and Annie ran across their yard. They ran down their street. They ran into the woods. They ran until they came to the tallest oak. They looked up. Yep, said Annie. Jack just smiled. He was too happy for words. That's our shooting stars, said Annie. The magic treehouse. She grabbed the rope ladder and started up. Jack followed. When they climbed inside the treehouse, they both gasped. A beautiful woman with long white hair stood in the shadowy corner. Hello, Jack and Annie, said Morgan Le Fay. Morgan! Jack and Annie cried. They threw their arms around her. What are you doing here? Said Annie. What do you want us to do for you? You have already done so many good things for me, said Morgan, and for King Arthur and Camelot. Now I want you to do something good for yourself. You're going to learn magic. Oh, wow, said Annie. Are we going to becoming magicians? Will you teach us charm and spell? Morgan laughed. There is the magic that does not need charms or spells, she said. You'll found a special magic on each of your next 4 adventures. How? Asked Jack. Secret rhymes will guide you on each journey, Morgan said. Here, this is the first. She held a slip of paper. Annie took the paper from Morgan's and read the rhymes loud. To find the special magic, you must step into the light, and without wands or spell or charms, turn daytime into night. Turn daytime into night? Said Jack. How can we do that? Morgan smiled. That's what you have to find out, she said. Jack had lots of questions, but before he could ask any of them, the flash lit up the treehouse. He closed his eyes against the lights. When he opened them, Morgan Le Fay was gone. On the floor where she stood was a book. Morgan didn't tell us enough, said Jack, but she tell us this research book. But she left this research book, said Annie. She picked up the book, and it spelled us the first place to go. She held the book up to the great light at the window. The cover shows the busy rivers with the boats and the bridge. The title was Merry Old England. What's OLDE means? Asked Annie. I think that's the old way of spelling old, said Jack. You say it's the same. So we're going to Merry Old England to find magic, said Annie. That sounds fun. Ready? I guess, said Jack. He still wished they'd gotten more information from Morgan, but he pointed at the cover of the research book. I wish we could go there, he said. The wind started to blow. The treehouse started to spin. The wind blew harder and harder, and everything was still. Absolutely still. Chapter 2, London Bridge. Warm daylight flooded into the treehouse. Jack opened his eyes. Annie was wearing a long dress with an apron. Jack was wearing a shirt with a puffy sleeve, knee-length pants, and tied. Their shoes was leather slippers. Jack's backpack was now the leather bag. These clothes are weird, said Jack. His voice was nearly drowned out by the sound of thundering wagon's wheels coming from below. What's going on? Said Annie. She and Jack looked out. The treehouse had landed in a patch of trees near the wide brown river. Wagons, carts, and people were heading toward the river. Ferry boats, sailing ships, and white swans glided across the water. Wow, it's so busy, said Annie. Jack opened the research book and read, in 600, over 100,000 people live in London, England. At that time, England was ruled by Queen Isabel I. She was much loved by her people. A queen? Cool, said Annie. Jack took out his notebook and wrote, London, 1600, Queen Isabel I. I never seen bridge like that, said Annie, looking to the left. Jack looked with her. A giant stone bridge across the river. The bridge looked like a small town. It was crowded with houses, shops, and even a church. Jack found a picture of the bridge in the research book. He read aloud. At the heart of London was London Bridge. The bridge crossed the Thames River. At different times in history, the bridge fell down, but it was always built again. Oh wow, said Annie. That must be where the song comes from, she sang. And the bridge is falling down, falling down. While Annie sang, Jack took out his notebook and wrote, London Bridge crosses Thames River, crowded with stores and houses. Let's look for the magic, said Annie. She read Morgan's note again. To find the special magic, you must step into the light, and without wands, spells, or charms, turn daytime into night. Jack squinted up at the sky. It was very blue, without even the cloud. It's just not possible, he said, shaking his head. But he threw the research book and his notebook into his leather bag. Then he followed Annie down the rope ladder. When they reached the ground, they started walking toward the river. P.U., Annie said, holding her nose. The river smelled terrible. No one else seems to mind the smell, though. People were cheerfully pedaling into ferry boats or heading for the bridge. They all seemed happy, as if they were going some place fun. A group of rag boys brushed past Jack and Annie. They were about 12 or 13 years old. They were laughing and out of breath. Hurry, we'll be late, one shouted. The boys ran toward the stone gateway leading to the bridge. Late for what? Said Annie. What's on the other side of that bridge? Why are they in such a hurry to get there? I don't know, said Jack. He pulled out the research book. I'll see what the book says. No, let's just go, or we'll be late, said Annie. She took up running. Okay, said Jack. He put away the books and ran after her toward London Bridge. Chapter 3. The Beer Garden. Jack and Annie passed under the stone gateway that led onto a London Bridge. As they started across, Jack was amazed. The bridge was so noisy and smelly. Wagons will rumble like thunder over the cobblestones. Pots clink in carts. Horses sneeze. Shopkeeper shouted, good pies, hot peas, new pins, shoes, soap, salt. A shoekeeper caught Jack's eyes. What late, you boy? He shouted. Nothing, thank you, said Jack, and kept walking. "Watch out!" the cart driver yelled. Jack grabbed Annie's hand. He pulled her out of the way. The cart rolled past them over the narrow roadway. "Look," said Annie. She pointed to the bear in the wooden cage in the back of the cart. The bear had made brown fur. His head was down. As the cart rumbled on, Jack shook his head. "What's next?" he said. "Theme," said Annie, looking up. She pointed at large black birds sitting hunched at the edge of the rooftop. The birds sat still as they stared down at all the cars and animals and people crossing London Bridge. Jack shivered and moved quickly past the gate of the silent bars. Finally, he and Annie came to the end of the bridge. They stepped onto the riverbank. There they stopped and looked around. "I wonder where those big kids went," said Annie. Jack started the crowd heading down the road that led from the bridge. There was no sign of the group of rag boys. Jack took out the research book. He found a picture of London Bridge. He read aloud. "London Bridge connected London to the south bank of the river, an area where Londoners went for internment. The Bear Garden was a popular spot." "The Bear Garden?" said Annie. "That sounds good. Where's that?" Jack found the map of the south bank. He pointed to the circle that was labeled Bear Garden. "Here," he said. He looked up, and there! She pointed to a dark round building in the distance. "Great," said Annie. "I want to see the garden filled with bears." "Let's read," started Jack. "Let's look," said Annie. She headed toward the bear garden. Jack put away their books and followed her. As they got closer, they heard loud shouting and laughter coming from inside the round building. Annie stopped. "Wait," she said. "I'm getting a bad feeling about the bear garden. Maybe we should read more about it." Jack opened the books again. He read aloud. An area called the Bear Garden. People watch bears fight with dogs. Animal fight were the common sports in old England. They were against the law today. "Bears fight with dogs? Yuck," said Annie. "I couldn't stand to watch that." "Me neither," said Jack. "Forget the place." He started to walk away. "Hey, Jack, look over here," said Annie. She pointed to a car nearby. "That's the bear that passed us on the bridge." Chapter 4. The Midsummer Night Dream. Annie and Jack ran over to the cart. In the back of it was a cage. In the cage was a big brown bear. The bear was slumped over, his hands still down. The signs on the cart said, "Dan the Dancing Bear." "Dan?" Annie asked. "Are you going to fight?" The lonely-looking bear raised his huge head and looked at Annie. His dark eyes were sad. He let out a low moan. "I understand," Annie said. "You don't want to fight. You're asking me to take you away." Annie reached for the door of the bear cage. "Away with you!" someone shouted angrily. "That's my bear!" Jack and Danny rolled around. The cart driver was charging toward them. "He's mine! I'm selling him!" the man shouted. "Come on, Annie, let's go," said Jack. He pulled her into the crowd, walking down the road. "But I have to save Dan," said Annie, looking over her shoulders. "That guy wants to sell him to the bear fights." "I know," said Jack, "but we can't just steal him. That guy is his owner." Jack looked around. He needed to get Annie's mind off the bear. He saw the group of older kids from the bridge. They were walking toward the round white building. "Hey, look, the kids from the bridge," he said. "Let's see where they're going." "What about Dan?" said Annie. "We can figure that out later," said Jack. "Let's follow those kids now." He steered Annie toward the white building. When they got closer, Jack read a sign out front. The play at the Grove Theater, the Midsummer Night Dream. Great, thought Jack, and he loved plays. He loved acting in them at school. A man stood at the door of the theater. He was holding a box. "A penny to stand! A penny to stand!" he shouted. The older kids dropped coins into the box and went inside. "Wow, they played cost only a penny," said Jack. "That's cheap." "But we don't have any pennies," said Annie. "Besides, I want to go back to free the bear." Jack sighed. "What will you do with him if you free him, Annie?" he asked. "I'll figure something out," she said. "Well, figure it out when the owner's not standing there," Jack said. "Right now, let's learn something about this play." He quickly pulled out the research book. He found a picture of the Globe Theater. He wanted Annie to forget about the bear, so he read with lots of feeling. The first theater were built in old England. Because there was no electricity, plays were performed during the day when it was light. Almost everyone could afford to go. "Neat, huh?" said Jack, and he sighed. Jack kept reading in the loud, dramatic voice. Seating for the audience depended on how much it was paid. The people who could afford the higher prints sat in galleries above the stage. Others stood in an area below the "Boys!" someone shouted. Jack looked up. The man hurried over to Jack and Danny. He was long legs with a trimmed board and twinkly eyes. "I could hear you from across the way," the man said. "You read very well." Jack smiled shyly. "No, you are simply brilliant," the man said, "and I'm in great need of the boy who is a brilliant reader." Chapter 5, Stage Fright. "Why are you need a boy who is a brilliant reader?" Annie asked the man. "Because I have just lost 2 fairies," he said. He pointed at Jack. "You can read both." "And you are not," said Jack. "Well, bye, see you around," he said. He nudged Annie to move along. Wait, she says. She turned to the man. "What do you mean? My brother can read both fairies? Read them where?" "2 boys actors didn't show up today to play fairies," said the man. "But your brother read with such expression. He can save us all." Jack stared. Was this guy saying what he thought he was saying? "You mean you want Jack to be in your play?" said Annie. "Indeed," said the man. "There were 3,000 people here today, waiting to see the play I have written. We cannot disappoint them, can we?" 3,000? said Jack. "Yes," said the man. "And one of them is the most important important person in the world." No way, I can't do that," said Jack. He had never liked being on stage. He always got stage fright. Wait, Jack," said Annie. She turned to the man. "You need 2 fairies, right?" "Yes," said the man. "Well," Annie tilted her head. Her voice went up. "I can read too." "Yes, let Annie do it," said Jack. "She's a great reader. She can be both fairies." But of course Annie cannot go on stage," the man said kindly. "Why not?" asked Annie. The man raised his eyebrows. "Surely you know it's against the law for girls to go on the stage," he said. "Boys must play all the girls' parts." "But that's not fair," said Annie. "Indeed, 'tis not. But we cannot change the law now," said the man. He turned to Jack. "So, Jack, will you join our players?" "No, thanks," said Jack. He tried to walk off, but Annie grabbed his arms. "Wait, I think I know what Jack wants," she said to the man. He will only be in your play if I can be in it too." "But that's not what I want, Annie," Jack said under his breath. But Jack, it would be so much fun, she whispered. And there's nothing to be afraid of. You got to read your part. You don't have to memorize it. Jack could tell that Annie really, really wanted to be in the play, and it was definitely a way to keep her mind off the bear. Okay, he said, sighing. He looked at the man. I'll be in your play if Annie can be in it too. The man looked at Annie. She smiled eagerly at him. The man smiled back. Why not? He said. But Annie will have to pretend to be a boy. She can talk up her hairs, and we'll call her Andy. Yay, thanks, said Annie with a grin. A turpent blasted inside the theater. Hark, the play began, said the man. The man said. He took Jack and Annie by the hands. My name is Will, by the way, he said. Come along, Jack and Andy. Be as swift as shadows.